I never imagined that the people I trusted most could become the architects of my worst nightmare. For years, I had dedicated myself to the law, building my career brick by brick, long hours at the office, sleepless nights poring over cases, always careful to follow the rules. I believed in justice, in fairness, and in the sanctity of the profession I had chosen. But one quiet afternoon, all of that certainty shattered. It started with a formal letter from the state bar. At first, I thought it was a routine notice, perhaps an update on continuing education requirements or a minor procedural matter. But as I unfolded the crisp envelope, my eyes scanned the words and froze. My own family had reported me. They accused me of practicing law illegally. The letter detailed allegations that I had taken on clients, given advice, and represented cases without a valid license. My heart raced. I reread the lines, hoping it was some kind of clerical mistake. But it wasn't. Every word felt like a dagger, every phrase a confirmation that my family had turned against me. Shock gave way to disbelief.
Why?
What had I done to deserve this? I replayed conversations in my head, trying to find signs I had missed. Had they been jealous of my success? Did they want to tarnish my reputation out of spite? Nothing made sense. I had always thought of family as a safe harbor, the people who would defend you when the world turned its back. And yet, here they were, weaponizing the law I loved to destroy me. The letter lingered in my hands, heavy with accusation. I felt the familiar walls of my apartment close in. I could almost hear their voices, smug and convinced, as if they were already celebrating some imagined victory. Memories of past arguments, subtle jabs, and cold dismissals came rushing back. I remembered every time they had belittled my accomplishments, laughed at my long hours, or implied that my ambitions were foolish. I had brushed it off, thinking it was normal sibling rivalry or parental criticism, but now it was clear there had been a deeper current of resentment all along. I sat down at my desk, surrounded by years of work. Case files, client thank you letters, awards, and certificates. Each document reminded me that I had always acted with integrity, that my license and credentials were valid, that I had never crossed any legal line. Yet, the feeling of betrayal gnawed at me, a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. How could the people who were supposed to love me most have orchestrated this? As the initial shock faded, a fire ignited within me. I realized I had a choice: crumble under the weight of their accusations or stand my ground and defend everything I had worked for. This wasn't just about law, it was about survival, about proving that my career and my integrity were untouchable. The battle had begun, and I knew the path ahead would be grueling, but I also knew I would not be defeated, not by anyone, and certainly not by my own family. The next morning, the letter still sat on my kitchen table, untouched, but its presence was suffocating. I could no longer ignore it. My hands shook as I dialed the State Bar's office, trying to confirm what I already knew. A calm, professional voice on the other end explained the situation in meticulous detail. A formal complaint had been filed against me, alleging that I had engaged in the practice of law without a license. The words hit harder than I expected, each syllable a cold, mechanical accusation that made my stomach churn. I asked about the specifics, needing to know exactly what I was being accused of. The representative read portions of the complaint aloud. According to them, I had advised clients, prepared legal documents, and even represented someone in a minor civil dispute. Every item was true in the sense that I had indeed handled these matters, but legally, I was licensed to do all of it. And yet, here was my family claiming otherwise, framing routine professional work as some sort of criminal act. It felt surreal. I sat back in my chair, mind racing. I had always known that law could be a battlefield, but I never imagined that my own family would become my opponents. Questions kept spinning through my head. How could they misrepresent my career so easily? What was their goal? Were they trying to humiliate me, sabotage my professional life, or simply prove a point? The thought that someone could manipulate the legal system to punish me personally was chilling. I realized this was not just about the law, it was about power, control, and jealousy masquerading as concern for legality. Fear began to creep in. The state bar wasn't like a casual argument, it was serious. A disciplinary case could ruin my reputation, strip me of my license, and end the career I had worked so hard to build. I could imagine headlines now. Local lawyer faces allegations of illegal practice. And all of it fueled by the people who were supposed to support me. The thought made my chest tighten, but I forced myself to focus. Panic wouldn't help. Determined to fight back, I pulled out every document I could find: licenses, bar membership certificates, client contracts, and correspondence. Each piece of evidence became a shield, proof that I had conducted myself ethically and legally. But I also knew that evidence alone might not be enough. I would need a strategy, a plan, and someone experienced to guide me through this legal maze. By the end of the day, I had made a decision. I would not let this complaint define me or end my career. I would hire the best defense I could afford, gather every shred of proof that supported my integrity, and face the disciplinary committee head-on. But deep down, a heavy sadness lingered. This wasn't just a professional battle, it was personal. My family had struck, and the wound was not just about law. It was about trust, betrayal, and the painful realization that sometimes the people closest to you can become your most dangerous enemies. And so, the fight began. I didn't know how long it would last or how brutal it would get, but I knew one thing: I would not back down. The moment I decided to fight back, I knew I was stepping into a battlefield where every detail mattered. This wasn't just about presenting evidence, it was about crafting a narrative that could withstand scrutiny from the state bar and counter the falsehoods my family had woven. My emotions were still raw, but I forced myself to shift from shock to strategy. The first step was hiring a defense attorney, someone with experience in disciplinary hearings. After a tense search, I found a lawyer who immediately understood the stakes. We spent hours going over the complaint, dissecting each claim line by line. Every accusation needed a counterpoint. Every insinuation required proof to dismantle it. My lawyer reminded me that while emotions ran high, logic and documentation were my greatest weapons. I began gathering everything: client files, contracts, emails, and signed agreements. Each paper told a story of legitimacy, of proper conduct, of careful adherence to the law. I collected testimonials from clients who had benefited from my guidance, some of whom were even willing to testify in writing. Each statement was a lifeline, a reassurance that despite my family's accusations, I had built a career on integrity and competence. At the same time, I knew this fight wasn't just about law, it was about character. My family's accusations had an emotional weight that could sway opinions. I needed witnesses who could speak to my professional reputation, colleagues who could vouch for my methods, mentors who could attest to my ethical standards. Phone calls, emails, and late-night meetings became my new normal. I felt like I was assembling an army of evidence, each piece a soldier ready to defend my name. The process was exhausting. Beyond the piles of documents, the research, and the phone calls, there was the mental toll. Every time I thought I could relax, I remembered that my own family had orchestrated this assault. The betrayal gnawed at me, a constant reminder that this wasn't just a legal fight, it was personal. I had to compartmentalize, to channel my anger and hurt into preparation. Any sign of weakness could be used against me. As days passed, a rhythm emerged. I would wake early, review files, draft notes for my attorney, and rehearse responses to potential questions. My apartment, once a place of solitude, became a war room. Sticky notes lined the walls, highlighting key facts and deadlines. Every conversation, every email, every document had to be perfect. There was no room for error. And yet, amid the chaos, a quiet determination grew. This was my chance to prove not just my innocence, but my resilience. My family had tried to attack my career and my character, but I refused to let them succeed. With each document organized and each testimonial secured, I felt more in control, more ready to stand before the disciplinary committee and demonstrate that my life's work was legitimate, ethical, and beyond reproach. The hearing was looming, and with it, the moment when all my preparation would be tested. I didn't know what my family would say, how they would twist the truth, or what surprises awaited me in that room. But I did know one thing: I was ready to face them, to defend my name, and to prove that integrity always has a place, even when betrayal comes from those you love the most. The morning of the hearing arrived with a mixture of dread and determination. I woke early, my stomach tight with nerves, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Today, I would walk into a courtroom not as a confident lawyer handling a case, but as the defendant, fighting for my professional life against accusations from the people who were supposed to love me most. I dressed carefully, choosing a suit that conveyed professionalism and authority. It was a small thing, but I knew appearances mattered in a courtroom. My attorney arrived shortly after, calm and reassuring, reviewing our strategy one last time. Every fact, every piece of evidence, every potential line of questioning had been rehearsed countless times, but nothing could truly prepare me for seeing my family there. As we entered the courtroom, a hush settled over the room. The state bar officials, the court staff, and the disciplinary judge were all present, their expressions neutral but attentive. Then I saw them, my family, sitting together, their faces a mix of smug satisfaction and feigned concern. It hit me like a punch. The very people who had raised me, celebrated my successes, and shared my life were now my adversaries. For a moment, anger flared, sharp and hot, but I forced myself to take a deep breath and focus. This was not the time to lose control. The hearing began formally. The judge, a stern figure with an air of quiet authority, called the case and asked us to present an overview. My attorney spoke first, outlining our defense, emphasizing my proper licensure, ethical conduct, and the baseless nature of the accusations. I listened, nodding, feeling a strange mixture of pride and tension. It was surreal, hearing my professional life described in a courtroom, knowing that my reputation hung on every word. Then came my family's turn. They testified, carefully selecting words to make their claims sound plausible, but there was an undercurrent of personal grievance beneath the legal facade. Every statement they made, every insinuation, felt like a personal attack. I felt a pang of hurt, but also a quiet resolve. I knew that their credibility would be challenged by the evidence I had meticulously gathered. When the judge began questioning, the air grew even heavier. Each question probed my actions, my intent, and the authenticity of my credentials. I answered clearly, calmly, and confidently, presenting documents and testimony that supported my case. My lawyer guided me, interjecting when needed, but mostly I spoke for myself. Every answer was a shield against the lies, every fact a counterweight to the betrayal. As the morning progressed, I began to notice a shift. The judge's demeanor, initially neutral, started to show engagement with the evidence I presented. The power of truth and preparation slowly began to overshadow the narrative my family had tried to construct. Each document, each client statement, each demonstration of licensure chipped away at their argument. By the time the hearing recessed for lunch, I felt a cautious sense of confidence. The battle was far from over, but I had held my ground. I had faced my family, the state bar, and the weight of betrayal head-on, and I had not wavered. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time since receiving that fateful letter, I felt that justice might prevail. The courtroom was quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against your chest and made each breath feel heavier. I could feel every eye on me, but it was my family's gaze that weighed the most. They had orchestrated this whole ordeal, and now, seated just a few rows away, they were about to speak directly against me. The anticipation made my stomach knot, but I steeled myself. I had prepared for this moment, and I would not let their personal vendetta overshadow the truth. The first to testify was my older sibling. They spoke slowly, deliberately, weaving the narrative they had crafted over months. According to them, I had knowingly misled clients and skirted legal boundaries. Their tone was calm, almost rehearsed, but the underlying venom was unmistakable. Every word was designed to chip away at my credibility. As I listened, I felt the old pangs of hurt, a reminder that betrayal often cuts deeper than any external attack. Next came my parents. Their testimony was more emotional, filled with concern-laden phrasing that barely concealed the judgment beneath. "We just want what's right," they claimed, though it was obvious they were framing my actions as reckless, unethical, and deserving of scrutiny. The judge listened patiently, jotting notes, asking occasional clarifying questions. Each answer felt like a calculated attempt to cast doubt on everything I had built, to twist truth into fiction. I gritted my teeth, fighting the urge to respond immediately. My attorney leaned over, whispering reminders. "Stay calm. Let the evidence speak. Do not let emotion dictate your words." It was difficult. Part of me wanted to stand up and shout, to expose the betrayal in raw, undeniable terms. But I knew that in a courtroom, rage is a liability. Composure was my ally, and I clung to it fiercely. Then it was my turn. The judge called me to the stand, and I rose, feeling the weight of every accusation and every gaze. I began with the facts: my valid license, my years of documented experience, and the testimony from clients who could confirm my professionalism. I presented each piece of evidence methodically, letting logic, not emotion, guide my words. I explained every step I had taken in each case cited by my family, demonstrating that I had acted within the law at all times. The contrast was stark. While my family spoke in insinuations and subjective interpretations, I relied on verifiable facts. Client statements, signed documents, emails, all spoke louder than their accusations. The judge leaned forward, clearly absorbing the differences between personal grievances and objective evidence. Still, the pain of betrayal lingered. Hearing the people who raised me attempt to dismantle my reputation was an emotional blow I couldn't ignore. Yet, in that moment, I realized something crucial. Their testimony could only sway the narrative so far. Evidence, truth, and preparation carried more weight than resentment. And as I looked at them, their expressions faltering under the weight of facts, I felt a quiet vindication. The first round of testimonies ended, but the tension in the room remained. I had faced my family's accusations head-on, answered every question, and presented my case with clarity. Yet, deep down, I knew the battle was far from over. The fight for my reputation, my career, and my sense of justice would continue, and this was just the beginning of proving that truth always holds power over deceit. The room seemed to shrink as the judge leaned forward, his gaze sharp and unwavering. The moment I had been preparing for, the point where preparation met scrutiny, had arrived. This was no longer about accusations or family grudges. This was about the law itself, about the evidence and credibility that would decide my professional future. "Ms., your last name?" The judge began, voice calm but firm. "Let's address the specifics of these claims. Please explain your actions regarding the cases cited in the complaint and clarify your professional status at the time." My heart raced, but I forced myself to breathe slowly, to respond with clarity. I recounted each case, detailing my legal role, my licensure, and the steps I had taken to ensure compliance with state bar regulations. I handed over supporting documents as the judge reviewed them carefully, occasionally jotting notes in the margins. Each fact I presented chipped away at the narrative my family had attempted to build. The judge's questions became more probing. "In the instance of specific case, how did you ensure the client fully understood the legal advice you provided?" he asked. It was precise, measured, intended to test not just my actions but my intent. I explained clearly, referencing emails, contracts, and meeting notes that demonstrated transparency and compliance. I could see the judge nodding slightly as I spoke, his demeanor remaining neutral but increasingly engaged with the evidence. Then came the subtle, more difficult questions. "There appear to be discrepancies in the statements provided by your family. Can you clarify your interactions with them regarding your professional work?" His words carried more weight than I expected. This was the first time the personal aspect of the case, the betrayal, the jealousy, the resentment, was directly acknowledged in the proceedings. I explained carefully, recounting interactions factually, avoiding emotion while ensuring that the truth of my diligence and integrity was clear. Every question felt like a test of composure. I could feel my family shifting in their seats, uncomfortable as their carefully constructed narrative began to crack under the weight of facts. Yet the challenge was not only to defend myself legally but also to maintain poise while confronting the people who had tried to sabotage me. It was exhausting, but necessary. My attorney interjected strategically, reinforcing key points and providing additional evidence. The judge paused occasionally, reviewing documents and client testimonials. The tension was palpable. The courtroom was silent except for the occasional rustle of papers. I realized that this phase of the hearing was critical. The judge was not just hearing my words, but weighing intent, credibility, and the stark contrast between personal grievances and objective proof. By the time the questioning ended, I felt a mix of relief and cautious optimism. I had answered every inquiry with precision, presented irrefutable evidence, and remained composed in the face of personal attack. The judge would deliberate, but the foundation of my defense was solid. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope that justice, and not malice, would prevail. And yet, deep down, I knew the fight was not over. The final verdict was still ahead, and the next steps would test not only my professional resilience, but my ability to reconcile the betrayal I had faced with the integrity I had fought so hard to preserve. As the hearing continued, the tension in the courtroom became almost tangible. Every word from my family seemed calculated, every accusation meticulously crafted to cast doubt on my character and professionalism. But now, the tide was beginning to shift. The evidence I had painstakingly gathered was finally taking center stage, and its weight was undeniable. Client testimonials were read aloud, each one a testament to my integrity, diligence, and adherence to the law. One client, whose case had initially been cited by my family as proof of my wrongdoing, described in detail how I had guided them through the process, explaining every step and ensuring all actions were fully compliant with regulations. Another email chain, submitted as evidence, showed clear communication and consent in every transaction. Each document, each statement, chipped away at the carefully constructed narrative of my family's accusations. The judge's attention shifted noticeably. Where before he had been neutral, now there was engagement, subtle acknowledgement that the facts told a story different from the one my family had painted. He asked follow-up questions, requesting clarifications that I provided with calm precision. My attorney interjected when necessary, reinforcing points with additional proof, certified copies of my licensure, bar registration documents, and records of past cases. Every piece of evidence was a hammer, breaking down the wall of lies my family had built. I watched as expressions in the courtroom changed. My family, once confident and smug, now appeared uneasy. Their carefully rehearsed testimonies were crumbling under scrutiny. Inconsistencies they hadn't noticed before were highlighted by the very documents they had overlooked. I could see the tension in their eyes, the quiet panic that came from realizing their strategy was failing. Even more satisfying were the subtle glances of respect from some observers, colleagues, court staff, and other attendees, who recognized the meticulous work and integrity behind my defense. This wasn't just about legal compliance. It was about credibility, professionalism, and the ability to withstand pressure. I felt a quiet pride, not in triumph over my family, but in the knowledge that truth and diligence were prevailing. As the session progressed, it became clear that the judge was leaning toward my side. His questions began to focus more on clarifying the evidence rather than challenging me, a shift that signaled the balance of credibility had tilted. The emotional stakes remained high, but the legal argument was becoming overwhelmingly clear. My actions were lawful, ethical, and fully documented. By the end of the day, the courtroom had witnessed a profound transformation. What had begun as a tense battle against familial betrayal and accusations of professional misconduct was turning into a vindication of truth. My evidence was not only defending me, it was exposing the falsities of my family's claims. For the first time since receiving that devastating letter from the state bar, I felt a glimmer of relief. Yet, despite the momentum in my favor, I knew the fight wasn't over. The judge would deliberate, weigh every statement, and make a decision that could affect the rest of my career. But one thing was certain. The foundation of my defense was unshakable, and the lies that had threatened to ruin me were finally being dismantled piece by piece. The courtroom felt electric as the judge paused, reviewing the stacks of documents in front of him. The atmosphere had shifted subtly over the course of the hearing. Where tension and uncertainty had dominated, a quiet clarity was now taking root. My meticulously organized evidence had dismantled the accusations, but what came next would be unexpected, and it would turn the entire dynamic of the case on its head. "Ms., your last name," the judge said, looking over his glasses, "there are discrepancies in the statements provided by your family. Some details conflict with documented evidence, and others appear to be based on personal grievances rather than professional concerns. Can you shed light on this?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment where all the pieces I had gathered came together. I explained carefully, laying out examples where my family's claims had been contradicted by emails, signed contracts, and client correspondence. I pointed out that certain allegations seemed motivated by jealousy and personal resentment rather than objective observation. The judge listened attentively, occasionally nodding as the facts were presented. Then, in a surprising turn, the judge asked my family directly about these inconsistencies. Their confident expressions faltered. One by one, they struggled to justify discrepancies that had once seemed minor but now loomed large. Dates didn't align, emails were misrepresented, and some accusations appeared to be hearsay or exaggerated interpretations of routine professional interactions. The subtle but unmistakable evidence of personal vendettas became clear. It was a delicate moment. The courtroom, once tense with the threat of professional ruin, now held a sense of quiet revelation. I felt a cautious sense of vindication, but also a pang of sadness. This wasn't merely a legal battle. It was an exposure of betrayal from the people I had trusted most. The judge's questions highlighted the difference between objective evidence and subjective animosity. In doing so, he made it unmistakably clear that personal motives could not dictate the outcome of a professional proceeding. The shift in the courtroom was palpable. My family's demeanor changed from confidence to defensiveness, their words less certain, their claims weaker. The attorney representing the state bar began to adjust their stance, focusing more on procedural confirmation than on challenging my professional actions. It was clear that the credibility of my family had been deeply undermined. At that moment, I realized the magnitude of the situation. I had prepared for a legal challenge, but the real battle had been about character and integrity. My evidence, attention to detail, and unwavering commitment to truth had exposed not only my professional correctness, but also the motivations behind the attacks. The power of meticulous preparation and ethical conduct had never felt so tangible. By the end of that session, the judge leaned back, reviewing all evidence and testimonies, his expression unreadable. The case had reached a turning point. What had begun as a precarious struggle against false accusations and betrayal had evolved into a clear demonstration of truth overpowering deceit. My family's attempt to manipulate the system had been thwarted, and the scales of justice were beginning to tip decisively in my favor. The moment of truth arrived with a heavy, almost tangible weight. After hours of testimony, scrutiny, and presentation of evidence, the judge finally prepared to deliver his ruling. The courtroom was silent, the tension so thick it pressed against my chest, making each heartbeat feel amplified. My family sat rigid, their earlier confidence replaced by unease. I, too, felt a wave of nerves, but beneath it was a quiet certainty. I had done everything right. I had presented facts, evidence, and proof of my integrity. Now it was up to the judge. After reviewing the evidence, testimonies, and documentation provided, the judge began, his voice calm but authoritative. "It is clear that the accusations made against Ms., your last name, are unsubstantiated." The words hit like a cool breeze after a long, stifling day. Relief flooded me instantly, but I maintained my composure. I listened intently as he continued, carefully explaining his reasoning. He noted the thoroughness of my evidence, client statements verifying my professional conduct, contracts and correspondence confirming proper legal practice, and the meticulous records that demonstrated I had acted in full compliance with the law. He also addressed the discrepancies in my family's claims, emphasizing that personal motives and inconsistencies cannot outweigh factual documentation in determining professional conduct. Each point validated not just my career, but my diligence and integrity under extraordinary pressure. When the judge formally dismissed the case, I felt an overwhelming mixture of relief, vindication, and even sorrow. Relief that my career was intact. Vindication that the truth had triumphed over deceit. And sorrow for the fact that my own family had attempted to undermine me, forcing me to defend myself in such a personal and painful way. The courtroom seemed to exhale with me, and I finally allowed a small, cautious smile to break through the tension. My attorney gave me a subtle nod of approval, and I quietly acknowledged it. This victory wasn't just legal, it was deeply personal. The ordeal had tested not only my professional abilities, but also my emotional resilience. Facing the people who had tried to destroy me and emerging unbroken reaffirmed that truth, preparation, and ethical conduct always hold power, even against the most insidious betrayals. As I left the courtroom, I felt a profound sense of closure. My family's actions had been exposed, not just to the judge, but to the reality that their jealousy and resentment could not tarnish my work or my reputation. I knew the relationships might never be the same, but I also understood that personal betrayal cannot erase one's achievements or diminish one's integrity. Walking away, I reflected on the journey, from the initial shock of the complaint, through the meticulous preparation, the tense hearings, and the emotional strain, to this final moment of triumph. The experience had been harrowing, but it had strengthened me in ways I could not have anticipated. I had faced injustice, deceit, and familial betrayal, and I had emerged victorious. The judge's gavel, the dismissal of the case, and the undeniable validation of my work marked not just the end of a legal battle, but the beginning of a renewed sense of self, clarity, and confidence. I had defended my career, my integrity, and my name, and I had won. The courtroom was empty now, the echoes of the gavel lingering in my ears. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had happened, but for me, everything had changed. I had faced my family's betrayal, survived a legal battle designed to tarnish my reputation, and emerged with my integrity intact. Yet, the victory was bittersweet. While justice had been served, trust, especially the kind that had been broken by those closest to me, was a far more complicated matter. In the days following the dismissal, I reflected on what had truly been at stake. My career had been in jeopardy, yes, but so had my faith in family and in the people I trusted. I realized that rebuilding my life meant not only reaffirming my professional standing, but also redefining my relationships. I could not control their choices or force them to act differently, but I could control how I responded, how I protected myself, and how I chose to move forward. I reached out to supportive colleagues and friends, seeking guidance and perspective. Their encouragement reminded me that while betrayal stings, the world still holds people who value integrity and truth. I began organizing my work, preparing for new cases, and reconnecting with clients who had stood by me. Each email, phone call, and meeting felt like a brick in a wall of renewal, rebuilding not only my career but also my confidence. Addressing family relationships was more delicate. Some chose to distance themselves, unwilling to acknowledge the harm they had caused, while others offered tentative apologies. I listened, but I did not rush forgiveness. Trust is earned, not demanded, and I was determined to protect my emotional and professional well-being. I realized that distance sometimes fosters clarity, and boundaries are a necessary part of healing. At the same time, I focused on personal growth. I journaled, reflected on lessons learned, and sought ways to turn the experience into a source of strength rather than lingering pain. I recognized that this ordeal, as traumatic as it had been, revealed my resilience, resourcefulness, and unwavering commitment to truth. I emerged not only vindicated but stronger, capable of navigating both professional challenges and personal betrayals with poise and wisdom. In time, I noticed a shift in myself. I no longer felt the same fear or hesitation that had plagued me at the start of the case. My confidence in my skills and judgment was renewed. I knew that while betrayal had tested me, it had not defined me. My career, my integrity, and my sense of self had survived, unshaken, and even fortified. Looking back, I understood the ultimate lesson. Justice is not always immediate, and truth is not always recognized by everyone, but it endures. Those who act with integrity, prepare diligently, and face challenges head-on can withstand even the most personal of attacks. And as for family, I learned that love and loyalty are complex, sometimes conditional, and that protecting oneself, emotionally and professionally, is not only wise but essential. Walking forward, I carried the victory with me, not just in my career, but in the knowledge that I had faced betrayal, defended my life's work, and emerged with both dignity and clarity intact. I was free to rebuild, to trust again cautiously, and to continue my life with the unshakable confidence that truth, integrity, and resilience always prevail.